A hospital discharge form signed at 11:47 p.m. on a stormy Thursday night should have marked the end of Isla Monroe's brief and dangerous connection to the man in room 304. For 72 straight hours, she had checked his vitals, adjusted for drips, cleaned wounds, and pretended not to notice the 4 heavily armed guards stationed right outside his door like silent shadows of death. That was supposed to be the full extent of her involvement with Dominic Ashford, the city's most feared and mysterious syndicate leader, the man who had taken 3 bullets to the chest during a savage territorial ambush outside an old downtown warehouse. But when she quietly stepped into his private suite just before midnight to collect the final discharge paperwork, everything changed. Dominic was no longer lying down. He was sitting upright on the edge of the hospital bed, his broad chest wrapped in thick white bandages, his dark, piercing eyes locked onto her face with an intensity so powerful it made her forget how to breathe. Before she could even set the clipboard down on the rolling tray beside him, he spoke 6 words that shattered her entire world. "Sleep beside me. I'll pay whatever you want." Isla wasn't naive. She knew exactly who Dominic Ashford was. The tabloids secretly called him the Phantom King, the invisible ruler who controlled major shipping routes, sprawling real estate empires, and half the city's underground economy without ever appearing in a single public photograph. She also knew her own desperate reality: 3 months behind on rent, student loans crushing her paycheck every month, and her 12-year-old brother Marco who desperately needed braces and proper school supplies she simply couldn't afford. Sleeping next to a mafia boss wasn't a simple transaction. Even if the offer came wrapped in raw desperation rather than cruelty, accepting it meant stepping into a world where consequences could be deadly. Would you take money from a dangerous man to save your family, or walk away and let everything fall apart? Drop your answer, take it or walk away, in the comments right now. The air in room 304 smelled of strong antiseptic, expensive cologne, and something far darker: the faint, metallic trace of gunpowder still clinging to the black leather jacket draped carelessly over the guest chair. Isla stood frozen in the doorway, her fingers gripping the clipboard so tightly that the sharp plastic edges cut into her palm. Dominic didn't repeat his offer. He simply watched her with that same unnerving, absolute stillness he had displayed for 3 full days while surgeons dug bullets out of his ribs and chest cavity. No screaming, no panic attacks, just cold, unbreakable control. "Mr. Ashford," Isla began carefully, her voice steady even as her pulse hammered wildly. "You're being discharged in the morning. Hospital policy. I'm not asking you to break any rules," he cut in, his voice low and rough, still hoarse from the intubation tube. "I'm hiring you privately. 1 night only. You sleep in that chair beside the bed. Check my vitals every 2 hours. If my breathing becomes unstable or the stitches rupture, you call the surgical team immediately." He paused, his sharp gaze dropping briefly to her worn, scuffed nursing shoes, the kind worn by someone who couldn't afford the comfortable, expensive gel-cushioned ones. "I'll pay you $50,000. Cash. Tomorrow morning. No contract. No trace." The number struck her like a physical blow. $50,000. That was an entire year of rent, Marco's braces, and enough to finally breathe without the constant weight of collection calls and eviction threats. But it was also incredibly reckless. "Why me?" she whispered, barely able to find her voice. "Because you're the only person in this entire building who looked at me like I was a patient, not a threat or a monster." Dominic shifted slightly on the bed, wincing as the movement pulled at his fresh sutures. "Every other nurse who entered this room spent more time glancing nervously at my guards than actually checking my condition. You didn't. You just did your job quietly and professionally." He gestured toward the chair with a small nod. "I don't trust easily, Isla, and I don't sleep well when I'm vulnerable. But for 72 hours, you kept me alive without asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. So now I'm asking you, stay 1 night. Make sure I don't stop breathing before sunrise." Every rational voice in her head screamed that this was a terrible, life-altering mistake. Money from men like Dominic Ashford always came with invisible, suffocating strings. But $50,000. She pictured her little brother Marco sitting in their cramped, dimly lit apartment right now, doing homework under a single flickering bulb because they couldn't afford to fix the ceiling light. She remembered the bright red eviction notice taped to their door. 1 night, she said quietly, almost to herself. "Just monitoring. Nothing more." "Nothing more," Dominic agreed, his voice softening just slightly. She pulled the guest chair closer to the bed, sat down slowly, and folded her hands in her lap, eyes fixed on the steady green lines of the heart monitor. Dominic leaned back against the pillows. For the first time in 72 hours, the Phantom King allowed his iron control to slip and finally let himself fall asleep. Isla truly believed that staying one night would be the end of it. She had no idea that by the time the sun rose, Dominic Ashford would make her an offer that had nothing to do with medical monitoring, and everything to do with the fact that she was the first person in over a decade who made him feel safe enough to close his eyes. The night passed in quiet, measured intervals, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., marked only by the soft rhythmic beeping of the machines and the occasional low murmur of guards changing shifts outside. Isla checked his vitals every 90 minutes like clockwork. Pulse steady. Oxygen levels normal. No fever. Every time she leaned over to adjust his foredrip or carefully inspect the bandages, Dominic's eyes would flicker open for a brief moment, tracking her movements with sharp awareness before closing again. Even unconscious, he looked like a man permanently braced for the next attack. At 5 a.m., as the first faint gray light of dawn crept through the blinds, his deep voice broke the silence. "You're still here." Isla looked up from the medical chart she had been updating. "You hired me until morning. It's almost morning. Most people would have taken the money and disappeared the second I fell asleep. I'm not most people." A ghost of a smile, faint, almost non-existent, touched his lips. He tried to sit up straighter and grimaced in pain. Isla stood immediately, moving to his side and gently pressing him back against the pillows with careful hands. "Careful. Your stitches are still fresh. I've had worse." "That's not as comforting as you think it is." She checked his bandages thoroughly. "When was the last time you actually slept more than 2 hours straight?" He remained silent for a long moment, jaw tight. 6 years. The answer landed heavily between them. "That's not sustainable," Isla said softly, her heart aching unexpectedly. "Neither is running a syndicate." His voice was flat and matter-of-fact. "The moment I lower my guard, someone puts a bullet in me. 3 days ago, they finally got close enough. You won't survive the next attempt if you don't let your body recover properly. I heal faster in my own space. Your own space doesn't have a trauma nurse on call 24/7. Dominic's intense gaze locked onto hers, unblinking. But it could. He offered her a full-time private position, 6 weeks of medical supervision minimum, with the possibility of staying on permanently. Separate living quarters in his estate. Complete security. Her brother Marco would be brought along, given his own room, access to private tutors alongside Dominic's own nephew, and a far better life than their current struggling existence. Isla's entire world tilted on its axis. By 7 a.m., she found herself standing in the hospital parking garage beside a sleek black armored SUV with tinted windows. Her small overnight bag was already loaded. Dominic's head of security, a man named Carter with a scarred jaw and watchful eyes, informed her that Marco's school had been notified and her brother would be picked up that afternoon. Everything from their old apartment was already being packed and moved. 30 minutes later, the vehicle passed through heavy iron gates and up a long tree-lined driveway, arriving at a sprawling yet understated stone estate overlooking the river. It wasn't flashy, just quiet, overwhelming power. Her new suite was larger than her entire previous apartment combined. A king bed, private sitting area with floor-to-ceiling windows, luxurious bathroom, and a closet already filled with clothes in her exact size. She thought adjusting to this new luxurious but dangerous world would be the hardest part. She was wrong. 3 nights later, at exactly 2:14 a.m., a raw, agonized scream tore through the silent hallway. Isla bolted out of bed, grabbed her emergency medical bag, and sprinted barefoot down the corridor to Dominic's quarters. She didn't knock. She burst inside. Dominic was sitting upright, chest heaving, sweat soaking through his bandages, eyes wild and haunted by ghosts only he could see. After calming his panic and checking his wounds, he finally opened up about the brutal torture he had endured 6 years ago, the 3 days of hell that had left him unable to sleep peacefully since. That same morning, still exhausted but calmer, he presented her with a new contract, not just as his nurse, but as his live-in companion and personal anchor, the one person he trusted completely when the nightmares and darkness closed in. Isla signed it. She thought this decision would finally bring some stability and peace to both their lives. She had no idea that 72 hours later, The same ruthless enemies who had once tried to break Dominic would strike again. This time they left a chilling message written in blood on her brother Marco's school locker. We found his weakness. Trade her for territory, or we take her anyway.